There she is.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, this is Angela Tsukiji with the North State BIA. And I'd like to say, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for being a member. We're very proud to have you as a member and be able to gather and get together as an industry and as an association. I would like to welcome you to Hot Topics, Building in the Niche. We have a really great group of people here on our panel to have a roundtable discussion, and I would like to go ahead and get us started by thanking our sponsor, Rick Engineering, and to introduce our facilitator, Don Ruthroth with Dahlin Architecture Planning. Don?
Well, thank you, Angela. Welcome, everybody. I'm pleased to be here with Mike Van Kittich from Williams Homes, Christopher Brown from Next, and Brian Mooney from Rick Engineering. And we're going to talk about building in the niche. So, gentlemen, we were talking just a few minutes ago about how challenging it is to do something new because Americans are resistant to change. And I found that very interesting. I know in my own travels, I've observed that, and I've actually started trying to make that happen from the design side. But of course you always get, oh, I don't know. Should we really, has anybody done that before? I love that question. And it's like, of course not. So Mike, you were in particular waxing poetic, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about why, what are the challenges to doing something new from your perspective?
Well, thank you. Good morning, everybody, and appreciate being here. You have to be able to have the courage to do it and to sell it. And, when you've got a multi-million-dollar investment sitting there costing you money every second of every day, it becomes very tricky to navigate the forces that all think that this is what we have to do in order to sell a house. And it's about having the courage and the fortitude to stand up for what you believe in and say this will work, and it's tricky to do. And I'm not saying we're experts at it or that it's even been done successfully, but it is something that you all have to buy into, and a fundamental change I think is necessary in coming to our industry. The question is who's going to jump off the cliff first and make it work.
Yeah, Chris, I know you've traveled a lot and have seen same things I've seen as I've traveled in Europe and other places. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's fascinating. Every time I travel, I always, I'm a home builder at my core. So you always got to go, okay, what's going on in the neighborhood? How do they do that? What's so different? And I just got back from South Africa, and we were in this cool little neighborhood in Cape Town, and we had a single family house. And then across the street, you had a duplex, and then you had another single family house. You had commercial 2 doors down. You had an apartment at the other end of the block, literally on the same block. And you had a church right next to us. So you had all of those uses, and you start looking at how we develop things. And if you look at Sacramento, okay, all the single families over there, all the industrials over there, all of the offices are way over there, and then the retail somewhere in between. And you look at that going, everybody's got to drive. Everybody's got to go somewhere. Yeah. And you look at, and we walked.
Why is there traffic?
Yeah. And we can't figure out why we can't get our traffic counts down. And look at those kind of things, and you see, we do it so terribly here in the States, but we have such a huge opportunity to do it right. But like we talked about earlier, is that you have to get adoption from the consumer, which it's foreign and it's never been done before. And then you've got to get it through a politician and the bureaucracy, like Brian was talking about earlier. And that bureaucracy is that, well, I can't approve that because I'm up for election and that's going to piss one of the neighbors off. Well, that's what we're stuck with. And we keep doing the same dumb stuff when we have an opportunity to really do something that genuinely connects the community and grows things in a positive manner.
I think the good news is that, and I got to have the opportunity of working really throughout the Western United States. I'm currently got redoing a comprehensive plan and zoning program for the city of Lafayette next to Boulder. And I just finished one in the Riverside area, actually, for the city of Riverside. and there are looking at innovation. We are looking at, because of the change and the challenges, we're saying, look, we've got to really rethink this whole pattern of what our zoning has been and how we look at comprehensive. And we're introducing things really called innovation districts really throughout the regions in relation, trying to give the developer and the architect more opportunities. There's no question that the problem quite often is the governance. It's the bureaucracy. It also is the banks. And so in relationship to funding. And so finding finances in some of these aspects is such a key piece. But it's got to be that demand, and ultimately the community has to come forward too, in doing it. But obviously our demographics are substantially changing really throughout the United States. And so how they will follow in these patterns, I think, is going to be a key area. But I do think California will continue to be an innovator. And I think Colorado is going to, so some of these other areas that I'm in, we're actually seeing a lot of very exciting things. But it won't come to fruition for 5 or 10 years. That's the other thing is, and then of course, as I said earlier too, it's going to come based on what kind of the profits you can generate in relationship to you guys, the builders. And I know, Mike, you said profits. What profits?
What is that?
But we have to be
I
more
saw
creative.
absolutely, and it's interesting you said that, because that made me think of, I just saw a presentation on maybe ULI Council or somewhere I was about the first carless community there in Tucson, and that is due to be coming out of the ground soon. Anybody think we're going to get there anytime soon in California?
We actually have an office in Tucson, so we're involved with some of those. We have an office in Las Vegas where we are also seeing things in relationship to, the autonomous vehicles and how we basically will design around that. And so that is something coming. We did look at one, and we were working at one in the Central Valley associated with one of the abandoned military bases. So I think that there's some chances that you may see something in the future, but it's going to be in an area that's looking to do something very, very different. And autonomous vehicles is a great example of actually how technology is going to actually change some of the things we're doing.
And I think when you
say
it, it'll be on a small scale.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's interesting you should say it around a base closure, because I immediately thought of, it seems to me the perfect one would be Alameda Point here in the Bay Area, because it's at least remotely connected to a fabric, and to do a carless community in somewhere that isn't really a part of an urban fabric seems challenging. But sometimes because of our timelines, right? You said it'll be 10 years before you see it. Alameda's been percolating my entire career at Dahlin, and I'm now in year 21.
Well, innovation comes out of problems. So the more problems we have, particularly with affordable housing and things like that, will create more innovation from guys like Mike and Christopher too, looking at how can you do something a little different and still make money at it.
Yeah, I think that's
so.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's our challenge, especially for guys like Mike and I, is that, we're not going to go up and compete against the big publics, because it's just not what we do.
Right.
And we can't compete there, and we shouldn't compete there. And so it's this type of opportunity is where all of us small guys, and there's more and more of us now that are doing it and doing it successfully. And the more that we collaborate and kind of can push things forward, that's, we talked about building in the niches. The niches is where we live. And the more that we can figure out how to do that. But then the challenge is we've got the bureaucracy of approvals. We've got the time length of approvals. Then we have the CEQA threat that goes with that. And then, oh, by the way, we've got to get a bank that is not normally somebody that's innovative to also buy into it to be able to give us money. So then if that doesn't work, then you've got to go private financing. Then you got to figure out your margins because you've got private financing. There's all of these layers that go with this process.
I was just quickly going to add, and unfortunately, most of those players don't care.
True.
Well, I was going to add a little bit of the opposite. I do think the legislators starting to recognize that the piece of CEQA, particularly as it relates to infill, is something sounds like they're willing to address as it relates to it. And we're dealing with a lot of that infill aspect of how to do it. But the local government side is that's a more difficult problem. And that's one of the things that leadership at the local government level has got to be a key piece to it. And leadership by groups like the BIA and other associated, the Urban Land Institute, some of those others, more education oriented.
So the bureaucracy it's an interesting piece. We're starting to see some jurisdictions eliminate, or at least talk about eliminating single family zoning. Do you think that's part of the solution?
Well, I'll jump in and say, sorry, I don't agree with that. As a just across the board, I'm going to eliminate something. To me, that's, you're really not looking at it analytically and looking at what works and what doesn't. You're not looking at lot sizes. You're not looking at some of the neighborhoods, and you also may just be creating more opposition to what you're trying to achieve. So it's really balancing out and saying, are there neighborhoods, like for instance, one of the things we're doing is we're going into old industrial areas and trying to create some of those areas as flex, because there's no opposition and it gives us a little greater opportunity to do something creative and innovative. But just going in and saying, I'm going to just make everything a duplex or a fourplex in relationship to zoning. By the way, Connecticut's doing that too. Connecticut's basically determined that single family zoning is racist, so there will not be any. That's what they're pushing for in relationship to it. And that just creates a lot of division in there. And we want to try to find things that work. So I think you have to be a little more surgical in identifying those areas that really can create opportunity zones for everybody, the architect, the developer, the builder, the entrepreneur.
Yeah, Brian, I tend to agree. I think, the conversation about, mitigating CEQA and starting to, get rid of that threat that is used in not a positive manner versus what CEQA was originally designed for, and then getting into this single family zoning concept, is that we still need zoning. We still have to have some guidelines within there. But I think if we look to Europe and we look to pretty much everywhere else in the world and how neighborhoods are built, and a neighborhood is, includes the little place to go get some food, and includes a place to go work and a place to live, and all of those kind of things, is that if we can push towards that, and I think looking at redeveloping industrial zones, that's probably our least past the resistance, because you're right, Brian, you don't have neighbors that are saying you can't do that. You don't have as strong as a NIMBY process in there. So maybe that's where the opportunity is to do something cool that then it becomes the first. Like we all talk about, nobody wants change and nobody wants to be the first. But if somebody, has the cojones enough to go out and be the first in there, then maybe it starts to become a framework somewhere else.
The strip commercial areas also are really ripe in relationship to doing very innovative and creative things. And then there are a lot of older neighborhoods in relationship that, I say older, I shouldn't say they were built in the 60s and 70s. Maybe they're newer neighborhoods. Think about one of the things I've been involved with the last 10 years is golf course closures. And so we're seeing a whole shift in a wide range of land uses that we need to be looking at that. How can we be very creative in relationship to using those?
Back to the original point about the bureaucracy, though, those are easy targets and it's low hanging fruit. The hard part is getting a planner to understand this is what we want to do. This is why we want to do it. And we want to help rather than them seeing us as the enemy, which is typically what we see. And the mentality at the jurisdiction level has got to change, and it has to be more accommodative. And unfortunately, we don't see that. And we actually have a mandate that we can't do business in one county in that area anymore. And I won't name it because it rhymes with Truck Romano. But the point is, we have people who have agendas that they're allowed to pervade into your project. It makes it very, very difficult to plan for an investment and make a business plan when you can't rely on a timeline or a schedule or anything that you think you can do, because the city is set, or the county, whatever the jurisdiction is such an unknown, nebulous.
Yeah, I think the BIA's most recent study on fees, and how exorbitant our fees are compared to the rest of the state. And we know that the state's expensive no matter what, but Sacramento all of a sudden just had this massive fee creep over the last 10, 15 years. And then you add the really just frustrating bureaucracy that exists in the region. And, and primarily that Truckamento place is really, really tough. And you have too many departments that are all in conflict and all, correct. Nobody knows who's on first. And we can't have any concept of where the fees are. There's no predictability. There's no nothing. So for us, especially for us as small guys that are using our own money, right, we don't have any room for error. And
Right.
if you're a big guy and you kind of float through that, okay, fine. But the small guys, we are on razor thin margins, so we can't afford to have 4 months between infighting between two different departments.
Yeah.
I want to apologize because I've got the landscapers outside of my office right now, and it's one of those times. But I will tell you that that's one of those issues we're seeing up and down the state in relationship. But the bureaucracy, the planning director, community development director, that usually relates to who the city manager is, who the leadership is in the council. And so it's really a larger political issue that we're dealing with. We see there's a shift in San Diego County that came recently when the elected officials just changed radically from more center right to left, and ultimately they've shut down every major new master plan community in the area, and the litigation in relationship to from certain environmental groups is closed down to where we really look at the county of San Diego being closed down to large scale new development of any kind. And it's really that aspect of leadership. It's not that way in the city of San Diego. I think we're being more flexible in creating, particularly some of our inclusionary housing approaches. But that leadership is so important in relationship to who's really running things, because they're going to choose the leader of the bureaucracy to reflect their values.
Yeah,
That's exactly it.
Yeah, no, it's very true. It's interesting, Chris, you talk about the fee structure. I sit on a couple of the national committees, and the national average figure is like $84,000 in fees, which is, it starts to put, we've always felt that pressure in California. I know the poster child was always Livermore, right? It was $130 a lot, $130,000 a lot in fees. And, but even that national figure has started to creep up. So it is something you're seeing across the board. It's obviously proportional to the land price in the various jurisdictions, but it started to wonder when I heard that figure if it was about the same percentage of the deal, right, based on your area. So obviously we would have higher fees, but it'd be interesting to find out if it is sort of the same percentage across the board.
Well, I think the interesting piece of that is as we really have a big push towards affordable housing, and we as an industry would love to build more affordable housing. Yeah. But if you can't put 100% of all of these new community costs on the builders and the developers.
No,
you just can't build
exactly
housing in that environment.
Yeah, we have to find a new mechanism.
Yeah.
God love Prop 13. I mean, we all, I think, in California love it, but I think we are really starting to see some of the problems behind that particularly directed money going away. We've never since then found a way to fund kind of the business of government, and they've turned to us as an industry to be the lion's share of that refunding, and it's put an undue burden on our side of the equation. So let's turn it just a little bit. Finding greenfield sites has always been a challenge, but what are some of the unique challenges to finding the niche site, the site that you guys really want, to do that kind of creative? What are the challenges around that?
Well, Chris said it a minute ago. We don't want to be around any of the publics we want to be where nobody else is, which is, it's tricky to do sometimes. You can't just go and pick a place. And when you do identify a parcel or something that looks like it might, fit into your box of constraints, you start looking at, what's going to be my mitigation on trees, what are, any kind of nexus between on-site, off-site development, what's the neighbor constituency going to say, things like that. It's almost always immediately traffic and noise and parking. Those are the three kind of bugaboos that everybody always wants to go to. It's easy targets, and working your way through the entitlement process. Again, depending on where you're at, but some of them are more accommodative and some of them are less. And, we really try and pick and choose where we're going to be based upon history and what we think a market needs to be served and how quickly we can get it entitled. The entitlements drive everything we do. And if we think it's going to be a 3 or a 4 year entitlement process, we probably won't even talk about it.
Yeah, Mike's right. I think, you know, our biggest challenge as we play in the niches is you have to kind of pick and choose. There's only so much opportunity, but Sacramento has a ton of opportunity for you know, suburban infill, and I think there's some ways to really do it cool. But we've got the unpredictability of the bureaucracy that makes it really difficult. So we do have to say, hey, these are 3 great sites. But knowing the political things going on in those neighborhoods, we're out. There's no way that we can say that that is a year and a half from now to be able to be fully entitled. So-and-so's up for election and so-and-so has a bent against this, you know, and these neighbors are doing this. So you got to just, even though that would be the right thing for the neighborhood, it would help grow the neighborhood, like
All of it.
positive to go with it. And you got to go, nope, I got to back out and I've got to go find someplace else that is in a more amicable community for a variety of reasons.
You know, I find that one of the things that also as a consultant, and whether you're the engineering firm or the urban planning firm, you know, that's one of the things that we can actually create great service to our clients is in relationship. Our San Luis Obispo office, we had an individual there that was really tracking all the available lands in relationship to out there. And then also looking at where they are in the approval process, or do they have any approvals? There are a number of old maps on a lot of properties all over the place that really don't fit today's marketplace. And so it's understanding where those are really throughout the state. And I do think that it's quite often it's the surrounding areas of the urban centers that create the great opportunities in relationship to that. Then it's a question of how far out do you need to go? And I think Sacramento, there are a lot of opportunities in the greater Sacramento area. And then it's working closely with that local jurisdiction. But for those individuals that are listening that are maybe consultants, that's a great little niche to get into, is in relationship to start collecting that data of the status of old projects that are in the area, vacant lands, larger properties, understanding the size of the property that's going to basically work from a financial standpoint for builders. And that's a great way to work with your clients. And I know it's something we've been doing really, not just here in California, but I know our Arizona group does a lot of it also in our Tucson and Phoenix offices.
Yeah, that's a great idea. You know, it's funny, you know, we also have the fundamental flaw, especially in the urban infill, is the owners think their property is the prettiest neighborhood. It's a little hard to go through the actual math with them. Doesn't really quite compute sometimes.
No.
The interesting thing is quite often the maps we find actually aren't really buildable today. You know, the products just don't meet that. And so, and you're right. That's the one negative part is this, that ultimately every owner thinks his property's worth really a lot more money than you do.
Yeah.
Sometimes they told me I could get 55 houses. No, you can only get 30. So that we've talked a lot about the external challenges. What do you find are some of your internal to your company's challenges towards doing this kind of development?
You know, for us, it's really kind of the same. I don't know that it necessarily matters whether we're doing niche infill or building in greenfield. You still always have the same constraints. I got to build them faster and cheaper, and marketing wants things that they just can't afford, right? And so we have to find the happy medium and build to a budget so that we all
want that dishwasher.
Yeah, right. They want the dishwasher, even though we don't need it. I'll tell you the big one right now is a tub in the master bathroom. I can tell you.
God. Kill that off.
A family secret, but mine has a bunch of towels in it, right? I mean, it never gets used. And so it's just, you know, what do we really need? And you mentioned it a minute ago, everybody's crying for affordable housing, right? What are we willing to sacrifice and give up so that we can afford to sell a house for $300,000 in Sacramento? I don't know.
You know, I want to just throw out and ask a question, because I've just agreed to the local AIA chapter to put on a seminar about ADA improvements. And that's, again, one of those major shifts that we've seen in both architecture, just building in general, parks, but also master plan communities. How much do you see the ADA aspect changing and adding costs?
So we actually build multifamily on 2 projects currently in Sacramento, and I've got one more that we just closed escrow on last week that'll be in the city of Lincoln. On any multifamily project has to have 10% of the units adaptable for ADA use. it probably adds about $1,500 a house to the cost of that. The hardest part is actually planning for it and getting it done right, because a lot of the ingress, egress, the path of travel, the civil set needs to really fully jive with the architectural sets to make everything work. It's not something people ask for. It is a requirement. I think it's a good thing to do. You never know who's going to be living in that home in 10 years or 15 years. And if it helps somebody with their day-to-day life, that's great. This is a really hot button for me. Somebody just mentioned gas appliances or the future of gas.
Yep.
I build all electric right now, and I'm not building anything with gas forever. I will not do it again. And there's just no reason to be putting a carbon monoxide producing fossil fuel to cook scallops in your home. Induction cooktops is a wave of the future. I put them in every house we build. And that to me is a paradigm shift that, the marketing folks have got to come to terms with. This is what we're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, initially there was the pushback that the consumer wasn't going to really understand. And they really, especially the cooks, they're like, oh, I have to have the instant of the gas. We're on our 4th project now that's all electric and seeing very little resistance. We get the common resistance. As you go through it, it's pretty impressive.
Here's my answer to that one, Chris, you're welcome to use it. I started watching the original French chef, Julia Child, from 1950 in her all electric kitchen. By the way, all electric, sponsored by GE, of course, but it was an all electric kitchen. All right, we have one question in the chat that I want to get to. Are you seeing ADU units becoming the future, a future feature for new construction?
Yeah, we're big fans of ADUs. I think most of the land plans won't allow it in new construction. It's really, really difficult. We actually are unveiling a new line of ADUs for existing properties to be able to plug them into existing properties in the region, because we're seeing a lot of people that just can't move. They've got a ton of equity, but they don't have anywhere to go and really can't laterally move into something. But they've got enough property in some of our, original suburbs in Sacramento, and there's an opportunity there. So we're rolling that out. So I think there's an opportunity there. I don't know how to, do it in an effective manner based on our land plans for a lot of places. But if the land allows it, do it all day long.
Well, it's certainly not going to be detached in our typical land plans. You can do it attached or as part of the house. But so lightning round, because we're near the end. Is it realistic to think about a $300,000 home in the Sacramento area?
It was.
And if so, what does that look like?
It was 18 months ago, because we were doing it. We were selling our condominiums in Natomas. We opened up at $299, and then all of a sudden, COVID hits and prices on everything go through.
And
the
everybody
roof
wanted one.
because you can't get it, and everybody wanted one. So naturally, we raise prices to cover cost increases. And at the end of the day, everybody thinks that we're making all this money. We lose money. We actually make less money because it takes longer to do everything. And it was realistic 18 months ago. Can we get back there? I don't know. We'll see. Probably not.
Well, not without a big shift. All right, and that brings us up to, oh, look, it's 9 o'clock, and I want to thank Rick Engineering for sponsoring this, and I want to thank you guys. It's a great conversation. I had a great time. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you had fun, and we will see you on the other side. Take care.
Thank you also. It was a great time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.